Okay, so the topic this week is what about the future of supply chain? What should we focus on next year in 2021 and beyond that? Now, actually, I gave a talk last night during an online conference that went for about 40 minutes or so. What I thought I might do is just summarize one slide. So the backdrop was all of the turmoil through 2020. We've had all this disruption in our supply chains. We're probably going to have a lot more disruption to come. We've got trade wars, we've got sourcing issues. We've now got lots of different channels opening up as a result of people being used to ordering at home, and demand is coming through in many different ways. So all of that stuff that we know we've all experienced. What have we learned from all of that, and what should we focus on for 2021? So that is the topic. And this particular little diagram I've split into three. So the first area I think we've got to focus on is supply and demand, and the particular aspects around that are, one is service. Understand the service that your market now demands, and omni-channel was the great thing over the last few years. It really is now, and if you weren't providing an online service to your market, you probably are now, and you will into the future. Online sales have really peaked for a lot of businesses. I've seen some businesses double the volume of online sales. That is not going to suddenly drop back to pre-COVID levels. People have got used to actually ordering online. People like me, I don't know if I want to go to a store anymore. Everything gets delivered, to home, and I like it. I like the convenience. So think about the service offers that you've got for your customers, for your clients, and think about that, going forwards. Which channels are going to be more popular? We also need then to have a look at demand and the demand through those different channels and how that's growing, the lumpiness of our demand, the peaks and troughs in demand. I mean, gee, have we seen that through 2020? Hopefully that's going to flatten out a little bit, but we've got to be much better at our demand planning, our forecasting, and all of those elements going forward. Sourcing. In terms of supply and demand, sourcing is going to be one of the areas where it's going to be a bit of a shake-up. Right now here, I'm in Australia. We've got a few challenges with sourcing out of China. China's being very difficult about importing our products. Already, I think a lot of companies are looking at alternative sources of supply for different products. And I think that just makes common sense. I think everybody around the world recognizes now that single country sourcing is not necessarily the way to go. We need to have at least a secondary supplier somewhere else that we can kind of try out and make sure they're operating just in case. So demand and supply, three things to focus on: service, the actual demand, and sourcing. Number two, flexibility. Wow, have we learned to be flexible during 2020? And I think we need to be flexible going forward, to be honest. It's been a very good lesson. So what aspects of flexibility am I talking about? Assets, for one. Think about assets such as warehousing. In the past, we would think nothing of throwing up new warehouses with huge capital investment in racking systems and conveyors and so on. Depending on the industry that you're in, is that necessarily the way to go forward? Because markets might be changing, demand profiles might be changing. We live in an ever-changing world now, and don't think that just because COVID is almost over, well, kind of almost over by the time this video comes out, hopefully, there's going to be disruption in the future. We've always had pandemics and wars and political disruption and economic disruption. So I think this has really been a great lesson for us. So flexibility in assets. Hey, look at some of the new distribution centres going up. Here in Australia, we're seeing a lot more now going up with mobile storage systems, like the sort of Amazon concept where little robots or AGVs will go out, pick up the whole storage system, bring it to the people, they can pick what they want, and then it goes back again. How flexible is that? We're using robotics for picking. If the product profile changes, if the demand profile changes, if you're getting peaks and troughs, it's very easy to reconfigure all of that. You just throw a few more machines in, and very, very flexible going forward. Not going to work for every kind of business, of course, but think about the sorts of assets that you have in your supply chain, and are they going to be these fairly sort of static, fixed assets, or can you get a little bit more flexibility into them? Number two on flexibility will be channels. I kind of touched on that from the customer point of view, but you really need to understand what channels are going to be important to you in the future, the demand going through those channels, the costs associated with servicing those channels. So much home delivery has gone on in 2020. I don't know how some companies manage it, because home delivery is not cheap. It's probably one of the most expensive forms of delivery. You think of the cost of a truckload of product going into a supermarket versus that same truckload in little bags being delivered to 100 different homes. It's way more expensive. So really get a good handle on your channels. What channels do people really want out of your business? How are you going to structure those, resource those, and try to manage those cost effectively? And then the third element of flexibility, and I did go on a bit about this at the conference last night, is really understanding your costs. Good cost visibility. And if you know me at all, you'll know what is my number one topic to talk about. It's cost to serve. That's what I mean. In a changing supply chain environment, you've really got to understand intimately the cost going through all your different channels, with all your different products, with all your different types of customers, so that you can make sure that profitability is maintained through all of those. Funnily enough, at the beginning of this talk last night, I said to people, you probably think this whole talk's going to be about AI and robots and digitization. It's not. Remember, all those things are enablers. So great systems and digitization is really important, but you've got to get these fundamentals right. And one of those is understanding your true costs and your product and customer profitability. You do need good systems to help you report that real time, but it's a basic skill, I think, in supply chain. So what about number three? We've had demand and supply, we've had flexibility. Number three, I reckon we shout about people. Have we paid lip service to that over the years, do you think? Oh, our people are our greatest asset. I tell you what, in 2020, we know they're our greatest asset. If you look at some of the businesses around the world and what they had to do in terms of flexing and pivoting and changing how they work, it was all down to people being willing, people being innovative, and people executing on those really rapidly developing plans. That's not going to change going into the future. And if you look at the most successful supply chains, they have fantastic people, great culture and fantastic people. So what are the three elements around people you think that we might need to focus on? One is attracting the right people. And don't just think, where you're operating in the world. Think globally. It's very hard to actually attract good talent sometimes into supply chain. It's not a very sexy industry. But look at what 2020 has done for supply chain. Everybody now knows what supply chain is about. 8 months ago, they all realized how toilet tissue gets supplied to them, how milk gets supplied to them, whatever. And so supply chain got a real shot in the arm and a much higher profile this year, which is great for the industry. And hopefully now that's going to enable us to attract a lot more talent into the industry. So let's try and make it, collectively a really attractive industry for people to get into, because it is, and it's a great career. We've got to attract people, we've got to train them. And again, at this conference last night, it was interesting, there was a poll going on, and 100% of the participants, and there were hundreds of people on this conference, 100% of them said they're going to invest more in training during the next year. That is so important. It's all part of not just attracting and retaining talent, but developing talent so that they can be more productive, so they can add more value to the business, and so that they can feel more fulfilled and develop their careers as well. So training is so important. And think outside the box with training. It's not necessarily degrees or formal training courses. There are all kinds of different training available. Heck, we've even got one on this channel. I'll put a link down below. It's an online training program, which is dirt cheap. So go and have a look at that. So training is really important. And then the third element, attract, train, retain. How are you going to retain your people? Because supply chain talent is so important in our businesses these days. The people who can be innovative, creative, and problem solve. That's really what we've seen, I think, this year, that supply chain managers have been great problem solvers. It's probably that engineering sort of thinking that we have. This is how we do it always. In the past, suddenly, boom, that's all gone. We've got to find a different way to do it. So think of ways that you can retain that talent and develop them and keep them going in your business, for a long, long time into the future. So that was a quick summary of a 30-minute talk last night. I thought the things going forward to really focus on demand and supply, flexibility and people. And where is automation and digitization in all of that? It's a really solid enabler. It's not the solution, it's the enabler, and I think that's really powerful. I did mention a couple of things in the talk last night that whilst supply chains during the COVID period have been a bit of a challenge, I think we've got a couple of other challenges coming up. And I want to just briefly mention climate change, which is having a bigger impact on businesses every year passes, and it's incumbent on us now, I think, to start thinking about not just reverse logistics and recycling, but circularity in our supply chain is so important. Have a look around the channel. There's a couple of great videos with Sherry Heinisch and Deborah Dole talking about circularity and sustainability. Our markets are going to demand that much more of us going forward. It's no longer just about wanting to have fair trade coffee and things like that. I think our markets are going to be much more discerning going forward, and we want to know, how much of this is made from recycled materials. What heavy metals are in this that got dug out of the ground by children in Central Africa, those sorts of things. People really want to know what's going into the products, and how can we recycle these products and actually get them coming back through the supply chain again. So I think that's where we've got some really good challenges coming up in our supply chains. So there we go, just a quick run through of some things to think about in 2021 and beyond. It's a great time to be in supply chain, I think. I hope you think so as well. So thanks for watching. See you next week. If you're new to the channel, I'll just let you know that if you hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe, you'll get notified every time we have a new video coming out. And a bit of a tip, they come out every Tuesday evening, Sydney, Australia time. So thanks for watching. Lots of comments down below, questions, always love to see that. And we'll see you next week. Bye for now.